Jeremiah chapter 10. This whole chapter was written shortly before the Babylonian capture of Jerusalem. At that time, the Jews were a thoroughly idolatrous people. In order to reprove the folly of idolatry, the prophet in this chapter draws statements of comparison between the glory and majesty of the Lord and the shame of idols. It contains a highly critical language against idolatry and concludes that the Creator alone should be worshipped by all mankind. This chapter has the following: 1. The comparison between idols and the Lord Almighty, verses 1 to 16. 2. A warning about the exile, verses 17 to 25. Important theological teachings are given in the below verses. 1. There is none like God, verse 6. 2. He is the true and living God, verse 10. 3. He is the creator of heaven and earth, verse 12. 4. He is the controller of the clouds and of the rain, verse 13. 5. He alone is worthy of the respect and adoration of all men, verse 7. 6. He is the God of Israel, verse 16. Idols that have no value, verses 1 to 5. Verse 1 gives a very plain preface calling the attention of the Israelite audience who are about to go into captivity to a heathen nation, asking them to carefully listen to the authoritative speaker, the Lord. Verse 2. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. The Jews who were about to live among the Chaldeans in their captivity, where many of them were already, the prophet admonishes them against the Chaldeans who were all much addicted to astrology. The heathen are afraid at such and such conjunctions and positions of the star and fear that such and such dreadful things would follow. God forbids His people to give credit or fear the constellations and conjunctions of the stars and planets which have no power of themselves but are governed by Him. Verse 3. For the custom of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with the axe. Jeremiah shows that the worship of the Gentiles was an empty delusion. The tree, while it grows and when it produces fruit, is not worshipped as God. But when it is cut down and the workman works on it and decks it with silver and gold to make it attractive, the dead and dry trunk of the tree is substituted in the place of God. The prophet satirically states that as they look upon the finished God, they forget its origin from an ordinary wood and fear it as if they were real gods. Their worship is founded in ignorance, stupidity, and folly. Verse 4 says that since these idols are not able to support themselves, they fasten it with nails and with hammers so that they move not and tumble down. The prophet's words, thus plainly and directly, is to set forth the vile absurdity of the idolaters, that men might learn to be ashamed of that. Verse 5, the prophet adds sarcasm by saying that after they are nailed to a post, they are upright as a palm tree, they have no life and are incapable of movement. Though they stand in a speaking posture as if they were about to speak, yet they do not have the power of speaking a word. They can give no answers to their worshippers, neither good nor evil. Therefore, the prophet endeavors to turn them off from their idols to the true God. The incomparable God, verses 6 to 10. Verse 6 and 7 shows that the Lord is transcendently great and His divine omnipotence, wisdom, glory, and majesty cannot be compared with dumb idols or the wisest of men. Verse 8. But they are altogether brutish and foolish. This talk is a doctrine of vanities. The very tree stalk out of which the dumb idols are made demonstrates the vanity and folly of the idolaters. These idols are unprofitable since they are incapable of demonstrating any source of assistance. The prophet tries to tell that the whole theory of idolatry is vanity, since it brings man into greater errors and ignorance of God. Verse 9. silver spread into plates is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz, the work of the workman and the hands of the founder. Blue and purple is their clothing. They are all the work of cunning men. Some suppose Tarshish to be Tartessus, the harbour city in Spain, which sent silver to the town of Tyre. Ezekiel chapter 27 verse 12. Uphaz may be the river Pishon. Genesis 2:11. The people used gold from Uphaz and the silver from Tarshish to cover their idols to make them look glittering and pompous. Blue and purple. Both were colors obtained from murex, a Mediterranean shellfish. These colors were used for the curtains of the tabernacle. Exodus 25:4. Blue and purple is now the clothing of the idols. These colors seem to be chosen to dazzle the eyes of the people. The blue is the color of the heavens, and the purple is what is worn by kings. And so, both denoted dominion and deity. Both the idols and their clothing were embroidered by craftsmen and goldsmiths skilled in that art. Verse 10 tells how the Lord is very different from the idols. The Lord is the true God. Idols are false gods. The Lord is alive. Idols are dead and really non-existent. The Lord is an everlasting King. Idols are only temporary and destructible. At His wrath, the earth shall tremble. God controls the earth and makes it quake whenever He is angry, but the idols have no power at all. The nations shall not be able to endure His indignation when it manifests. They must stoop and fall under it. Psalm 76:7. The wicked will not be able to stand in judgment. Psalm 1:5. A message to be conveyed to the Babylonians. Verse 11. This chapter containing this verse was sent by prophet Jeremiah to Jehoiakim and the other exiles in Babylon between 598 and 587 BC. Jeremiah tells them, "If the Chaldeans say to you, 'Worship our idols,' then answer them as follows." Verse 11. The gods that have not made the heavens and the earth, even they shall perish from the earth and from under the heavens. Confession with the mouth is necessary for salvation. This is a formula given to God's people to be made use of by them in detestation of the idolatries of that city. Please see the original Hebrew version of Jeremiah chapter 10 in the right side of your screen. The verse 11 alone, shown in the blue box, was written in the Aramaic Chaldee language which was spoken in Babylon so that the Jews might openly and plainly profess the true God in their own Aramaic language, which the enemies understood better than they did the Hebrew language. This verse, written in Aramaic, pre-signifies that they should be captives of the Chaldeans. Both they and their worshippers shall be destroyed, and idolatry shall finally be destroyed from the earth, and the heavens shall look no more on so great an abomination. This is one of the master strokes of the whole prophecy. Here, the prophet foretells that there shall be a final full stop put to idolatry. This verse is the only verse written in Aramaic language in the whole book of Jeremiah. God the Creator, verses 12 to 16. Verses 12 to 16 again appears in Jeremiah chapter 51, verses 15 to 19. Verse 12. He hath made the earth by His power, He hath established the world by His wisdom, and He hath stretched out the heavens by His discretion. The three attributes ascribed to the Creator are very remarkable. Here we have the true philosophy and the right origin of things. 1. The creation of the earth, the material world, is an act of power. God is a powerful creator. 2. The establishing, that is, the ordering and arranging it as a place fit for human dwelling, is the work of His wisdom. God is a provident disposer. 3. The spreading out of the heavens over it like a tent is an act of discretion. God protects the earth from cosmic damage by such things as excessive radiations and falling meteorites by stretching out the heavens as an atmospheric shield and protection. God is a prudent preserver. Naturally, the consideration of these attributes has led many to see here an allusion to the Holy Trinity. Verse 13 says that every lightning bears witness to the wise and almighty government of God and testifies the omnipotence of the Lord. Rain, wind, evaporation, and lightning act when God declares His will and pleasure and carries out God's commands. No one can tell where the wind comes from and where it goes, for it comes from His treasures when He summons them to blow. John 3:8. Though fire and water be contrary, yet the lightning opens the clouds to make way for the rain and is produced in the midst of waters, all which is so wonderful. Verse 14 tells us that the more an idol maker thinks to do anything well by his own wisdom and not as God instructs him, the more he proves himself to be a brutish wild beast. Verse 15. They are vanity and the work of errors. In the time of their visitation they shall perish. The idols are the fruit of the vain imagination of erroneous men that deserves only ridicule and contempt. At the time that the Lord shall visit upon them their sins, they will be unable to defend themselves and so perish. 1 Peter 2:12, Isaiah 10:3 and Luke 19:44. Verse 16. The portion of Jacob is not like them, for he is the former of all things, and Israel is the rod of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. The Lord has taken the Israelites to be his portion. So, the Lord's portion is his people. Deuteronomy 32:9. And David says, the Lord is the portion of mine inheritance. Psalm 16:5, Psalm 119:67. So, the portion of Jacob is the Lord. The rod of his inheritance is Israel, the people over whom the Lord rules. Psalm 74:2. The majestic name, the Lord of hosts, means Jehovah Sabaoth, the Lord of the armies of heaven, of the stars in their courses, of the angels in their ordered ranks, and of the armies of Israel upon earth. The glorious God of Jacob, the Lord of hosts, who created the heavens and the earth, is the only true and almighty living God, in contrast to the idols. A warning about exile, verses 17 to 22. God rejected and idols chosen, verses 17 to 18. Verse 17. Gather up thy wares out of the land, O inhabitant of the fortress. Judah is about to go into captivity. So, the prophet now returns to the main subject of his theme, the devastation of the land of Israel and the conquest of Judah as a penalty of their sin. He begins with a vivid touch in the picture of utter misery. He tells the inhabitants dwelling in the fortified city Jerusalem, that is, the fortress of Zion, to gather up their goods, which could contain a few articles for necessary use that can be carried in the hand in preparation for migrating as captives, for they are going into exile to Babylon. Verse 18. For thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will sling out the inhabitants of the land at this once, and will distress them, that they may find it so. Their captivity is signified by the slinging of a stone out of a sling that shows how sudden, swift, and certain it would be. Similarly, God would eject Judah with violence and suddenness from their country and send them all into captivity. At this once means at this time. Previous invasion had ended either in deliverance or at most in temporary misfortune. God's long suffering is exhausted, and this time Judea must be punished. That they may find it so. In the Syriac version, this reads, that they may find me, their God. This alone is worth finding. It certainly tells us that God sent them into captivity for their correction so as to know the true God. The nation's deep grief, verses 19 to 22. Verse 19. Woe is me for my hurt, my wound is grievous. But I said, Truly this is a grief, and I must bear it. In verse 19, Jeremiah's sorrow over the fate of his people is so great and he identifies himself with them so completely that the lament of the plundered and destroyed nation seems to be adopted as his own. I must bear. It is prophetical of their ultimate acknowledgement of their guilt as the cause of their calamity. I will take it patiently, by which he teaches the people how to behave themselves towards God. In the sad picture that emerges in verse 20, Jerusalem is compared to a tent-dwelling mother whose tent has been destroyed and her children carried away. Nobody is left to help her repair the tent. In verse 21, the prophet takes off all the blame from the people and lays it on the pastors who are the corrupt prophets, priests and counselors who failed to seek the Lord, which was the cause of their ruin. Verse 22, Behold, the noise of the bruit is come, and a great commotion out of the north country, to make the cities of Judah desolate and a den of dragons. That is, the report we have heard of the projected invasion of Judea by Nebuchadnezzar is confirmed. He has entered the land from the north country Babylon to besiege Jerusalem. The Chaldeans are at the doors, and the total destruction of Judea to make it a den of dragons has come. The noise of the bruit is come. This is the news of invasion. Note the antithesis here. When God sent them a prophet to instruct them, they turned a deaf ear and failed to hear. But now, at the voice of their new teacher, the Babylonians, they must hear. When one does not listen to God's prophets, God sends harder masters. Jeremiah's earnest prayer, verses 23 to 25. This prayer is in Psalm 79, 6-7 also. Verse 23. O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps. O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It means that man is not the master of his own way, but is directed and overruled by the powerful divine providence. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps. This is one of the most profound statements in the scriptures, which tells us that as long as men seek to be guided by his own counsels and by what seems good to them, they are destined to frustration and defeat. Verse 24. O Lord, correct me, but with judgment, not in thine anger, lest thou bring me to nothing. Jeremiah's prayer here recognized the need of Judah's punishment, but he prays for God's mercy and tenderness as the blow falls, so that it will be a correction only and not a destruction and utter ruin. In verse 25, Jeremiah prays that God should make a difference between his people that know him and the heathen who are ignorant of God. This prayer was just, because the heathen were devouring Jacob not as obedient ministers of the divine chastisement, but as wild beasts gratifying their lusts. In the eventual history of the chosen people, Jeremiah's prayer was answered. In mercy, God concluded their captivity and made it possible for all who wished to do so to return to Judah. But Babylon was ruthlessly destroyed by the Medo-Persians. Jeremiah chapter 10. Questions. Jeremiah chapter 10. Answers.